Okay, so hi everyone. I'm interviewing Jinya Mukherjee today from Montpellier Business School about her paper, which was co-authored by Anke Mittu, titled Deep Play, Work Engagement, and Creative Problem Solving in a High-Tech Organization. So the paper won the OMT Division's Best International Paper Award at this year's Academy of Management. My name is Caitlin Sherritt. I'm a PhD fellow at Copenhagen Business School's Department of Strategy and Innovation, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today, Jinya. So first of all, a big congratulations on winning the award.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Caitlin, for inviting me for this discussion. Really appreciate it.
Can you start out just by telling us briefly what the paper is about?
Right. So this paper actually is a part of my PhD dissertation, which I finished almost 8 years ago. And so this paper basically is a product of a very long ethnographic study that I conducted during my PhD years in a high-tech firm in the north of India. And I went in as an ethnographer with really no specific question in mind. Having said that, we are never tabula rasa. There is always some hunch as to what you're going to study. So my generic idea was to understand how people work together to sustain innovation. How do they continue to work together in groups and teams, and how does what leads to the sustainment of innovation? Because we know that innovation it's not that hard for many companies to do, but sustaining it is the hard job. So this is what I had in mind when I went there, and I was literally hit on the face when I walked into the organization by play. And it was also a time when I had absolutely no clue about play in work organization, although we had been reading in the last decade about all these smart organizations, Google, etc., who are using a lot of play, but it's all in the popular press, right? So I had to struggle to figure out what is it that is going on in this organization. And over a period of time, I realized that the important role of play in anything and everything that these people are doing. And hence the work started to focus on work and play. And the relationship between it. So this paper is basically an account of a type of play that although we know it exists, maybe, but we have not seen it empirically yet. And this is the type of incredibly immersive, absorbing play that is carried out voluntarily by people at work organizations, despite the fact that they're in a work setting. And the way it has this, the way it's interrelated, if you may, with the very deeply engaged work that people in very competitive industries have to engage in on a chronic, regular basis. So the paper is about this play, which we call deep play. And we call it deep play because it has some resemblance with the play that we have knowledge about in anthropology and sociology, and this immersive play, which is symbolically connected to employees' very fundamental concern. And in this case, the concern about feeling and being seen as competent, responsible professionals. And we show how this play helps sustain work engagement over time, leading to creative problem solving.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about how deep play is different from other types of play?
Right. So other types of play, well, we as ourselves as workers, as knowledge workers, we know the one type of play that we often engage in, which has been termed in the literature as kind of a diversionary play. So play that is light, fun, voluntary, which gives some respite and replenishment when you're working. So let's say I'm working for a long time. I need a break, right? It comes in the forms of break. I go to the kitchen in my research center. I take a glass of water and I find my colleagues there, and I'm talking about, I don't know, my dog, cracking jokes, having fun, or going for a drink together. So celebrations. So these have been the kind of breaks in light fun that we ourselves experience. We know it exists in all work organizations, more or less, right? Some organizations are institutionalizing these things, like birthday celebrations, and which was also the case in the organization where I went. There was also diversionary play. We focused on the deep play because that seemed to be the most incredible kind of playful practice that we saw. And then there is the other type of play that we know in the literature, which is basically playfully working. So to make work more enjoyable and often more productive, increases productivity, and that's a serious play. With prototyping, hackathons and stuff like that, which is very common especially in creative and innovative organizations. And then we see this play that we found in our organization, which is quite different from these two types of play. So as far as I know, these are the two different types of play that we have seen in the literature that exists in the current literature.
So it sounds like you went in with your research looking at something entirely different, and then play has really emerged out of your data. What were the most unexpected or interesting findings for you?
Well, the most unexpected thing was to see this kind of play, and trying to make sense of why the hell would people be spending so much of time engaging in this activity, which to me, as an ethnographer sitting there, initially had absolutely no relationship with. I mean, why would you, if you think in a logical way, why would you engage yourself in such deep, immersive activity that is completely unrelated to your work, takes your entire focus of attention away from work? Why would even an organization allow, or why would people even do that, given the fact that we are talking about a highly innovative organization in that part of the world, which is extremely competitive? I mean, people in the Indian market who works in innovation in high tech, the maximum time they would stay in an organization is 2 years, because it's so competitive. You just step out, you cross the road, somebody else will hire you. So this is and if you don't produce chronically all the time new innovative products, you're wiped off. It's super competitive as well as a work environment. And here these people are rolling on the floor, behaving like no adults should be behaving in workplace. So that was the most surprising thing, although for a long time we couldn't make any sense out of it. And it took us a lot of going back to not just organizations literature, but to anthropology, going to sociology, to make sense of what we were seeing, what we were like hit on the face with. That was one thing. And the second thing was figuring out how it can coexist with such deeply immersive work. And because that seemed like a complete paradox.
Right. It's such an interesting topic, and I think also very often overlooked or under-researched in the management literature as well. How do you think the topic of deep play contributes to existing and new conversations in this literature?
Right. Well, it has been, as you well point out, under-researched, underlooked. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we, as management scholars, we want to be working on serious stuff, like nothing so frivolous as play. Having said that, we know that it always existed. I mean, if you look at Roy's work, Donald Roy's work in the 50s, Banana Times, I think his was the first real account of play in work organization and how it's necessary for in his setting where he was an ethnographer and working in that factory, how this banana time and coke time and fish time were actually giving him respite from this very repetitive factory work, right? So it always existed. It's just that it was not looked at because we have so many more important and serious stuff to look at.
Mm.
And I think progressively with the new workplace, where new ways of working that we are seeing, which is where there is high autonomy, where the new workers are demanding their autonomy in terms of when I work, how I work, how much I work, where I work, this thing that's becoming more and more prevalent in our times now. Play is certainly going to play an incredibly important role, because not only is it something that is now more and more, still not so much maybe in the research world, but more and more organizations which are working in creative industries are realizing the role of play in employees' well-being, the role of play in employees' desire to show up and do stuff in the organization, the role it has on relational contracts between employees, because innovation is most of the time done in groups and teams. So if I've played with you, chances are high that when I'm working with you, I'll give my 100% because you're my buddy. You see, and that's exactly what I heard in my organization. And I said, well, what would it be if you played with somebody and then you find that you're working with that person? Because not necessarily all these people who are playing in my organization were working together. They were in all different departments, maybe,
Right.
They said, there will be a time when I played with you and then, I have a project with you. Of course, I'm going to work. And we know that, right? If you are a play buddy, it will really smoothen our work relationship as well, most of the time. So it does have an impact in every aspect. So I think more and more we have to focus our attention on play, because as anthropologists, the play theorists have said, play is fundamental to civilization and to our lives. So it's a fundamental thing. We see it. I mean, like you said a while ago when we were informally talking, that it's something that we all know about. I mean, so people relate to it instantly. You can't find a single person who cannot relate to playing. We're doing it all the time, But so I think it is progressively going to become more and more important, especially with this AI and things that are coming into work organizations. I mean, we as human beings, we will always carry this desire to play and to enjoy and engage in activity that is not necessarily beneficial to work, but which we do for our own sake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is fundamental to human behavior.
Exactly.
In terms of practical implications, in the paper you mentioned that play should be cultivated and not feared by organizations. Why do you think it is feared by organizations?
Well, for the obvious logical reason, if you have too much play going on, it will and it's logical for managers to think this, that it will take your focus of attention away from work. After all, play, when it's a fun activity, when it's enjoyable, it's something that people would care more for than the serious work activity, which although can be enjoyable for people, but maybe you may have moments when you're not enjoying your work, right? So for managers, the biggest challenge is that it's a disruption, it's an interruption from focused work, and it can take your mind away from what you're supposed to do. Hence, there will always be this tension, right? Work and play. And I think cultivating in the sense that play has, the kind of play that we find in our work is play that is not, it's very hard to actually graft this play into an organization. You cannot just copy paste it, just that play part. It comes with a contextual, certain contextual environmental factor as well. I cannot go to you and tell you now that Caitlin, you can roll on the floor and dance and play and do what the hell you want from today onwards. It has to have some alignment with the way the organization, the values of the organization, the way in which you work, that autonomy that you get in your work. So the way you are perceived, you as a professional, you're perceived in your work environment. So a lot of things that comes with it. So it has to be cultivated right from the bottom over time. You cannot graft it. Then it becomes like one of, I can't remember the person, but an author in play had said that it becomes a chocolate coated broccoli, right? That if you try to copy paste that on top of whatever is there. So it has to be cultivated.
Yes. With your research, have you explored any of these boundary conditions around play, around where it has a role and where it does not have a role?
Well, the boundary condition in the sense for play to even happen the way it happened in this organization, one thing that was very important was the autonomy at work. These people, you cannot actually have this kind of play if the people don't feel that they can manage their work themselves, and that that involves choosing your own task. 50% of the tasks that they were engaging in were chosen by them, having a say in the decision-making process, and having flexible work hours. So if I tell you that you come at 9 and you work till 7, and that you do this at certain periods of time, and if there are certain very rigid rules and regulations around the work design, chances are very low that you're going to actually be able to engage in this kind of thing. So that was one thing that was certainly there. And there was also this idea of this freedom that these people experienced, their perceived freedom. We can have a lot of discussion about whether it was real or true or false, or, but they perceived that they had this freedom to play when they want, to play with whoever they want, and to play as much as they want.
Okay.
And so those two were very important kind of conditions, contextual boundary conditions, if you may call it, for play to emerge the way it did. So if you don't have that freedom to play, and if you don't have that freedom with your work, it's going to be hard for such play to emerge.
Right. I wanted to dig a little bit into some of the methods that you used in order to research play. So you used ethnographic methods in your study. Can you tell us a bit more about your approach to this?
Right. So I was very lucky to have Anka, who was my PhD supervisor, who's a great ethnographer, as a mentor for this ethnographic work that I did. It was a very long, hard process. I was doing my PhD in France. I was flying back to India, in the north of India, where I do not originally come from, although I'm Indian. So I was living with the people of this company, and I engaged in participant observation for the three visits that I made to this company in 3 subsequent years. So I was more than 500 hours in the organization, and my observation data was like dating 42 days of observation from morning till night. So I would be typically I would be the first one to arrive along with the HR people, because the other people who had a kind of a relatively stable work hours. So they would be coming at 8:39. So that's when I would be getting in, and I would be often leaving the work organization at 9 p.m. Because there are many techies who would come at 3 and decide to work till 9, for example, right? So, so the kind of so I was basically using observation data and I was interviewing. But then when it became clear to us about this play and work, how they were alternating this deep play and deep work, it was necessary for me to do shadowing. So I shadowed 9 people between in the range of 3.5 up to 9 hours. And that was obviously quite a bit of a challenge, although I just loved every bit of it. It was really incredibly enriching for me to be in this organization and to see this incredible phenomenon unfolding in front of my eyes, which I absolutely had no idea when I walked in. So in terms of methods, I interviewed 128 employees, pretty much everybody in the organizations, and some several times. So it was 136 semi-structured interviews. And for the time when I would not be there, so I would come back and then start this 6th semester, and then to stay abreast with what was going on in the company, every month I would make interviews online, on Skype, with some of the top management people to understand where the company was going in terms of what they were producing and what problems they were having, how the recruitment was going. So that I was a part of this process. So I did, on top of this 136, I did another 16 interviews, which were not physical, but which was online.
Okay. Wow, a very intensive process for you too. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the biggest challenges were for you in that, and also how you tackled these?
One challenge was the fact that I am absolutely an idiot in software or coding or anything. I mean, it's not something that I know at all. So initially, when I was the first week, when I went there, they told me that I could choose any place that I wanted to sit, but I would go in the morning to the HR manager and tell her, okay, I would like to spend the first half of the day with the techies and the second half of the day with the writers, right, the content people. And so they would find me a place, because people could sit, everybody sat together there in their organization. So they would find me a place to work with, sit and observe whatever I want to do. So initially, for me, it was like, okay, how do I even understand this language that these people are talking about? And the fact that it was so different in terms of the way work was being carried out. That was not far away from the expectation that I had when I walked in the company to do ethnography. That was one thing. The second thing was the fact that I was a woman of Indian origin who spoke the language, which made obviously the language that they were speaking, mostly English though, but they were also speaking Hindi from time to time. I understood the language, right? So there were certain advantages, so to speak, that I had. But at the same time, as in any ethnography, there would be 1 or 2 people who would never warm up to you and who would always be suspicious. The fact that when the HR manager sent this mail to everybody in the organization the first day that I came, saying who I am and what I do and why exactly I will be there, and subsequently I sent this whether they have the right to withdraw, all of that, all the ethical stuff that I needed to do from my part. That was followed by the HR manager saying who I am, and I am a trained clinical psychologist. So the minute that featured on that resume of mine that she sent through, I think there were very few people who had this instant suspicion about me, and it came out particularly in one person who never really warmed up to me, and who always said that, well, you're psychoanalyzing me, or trying to find out what's going on in my mind, and so that was, I think, a challenge. But I think that's a challenge that most ethnographers would face, that there would be some people who would always be very suspicious. Or why you're constantly hanging around there? Why are you eating with us? Why are you staying with us all the time? Right? What exactly are you doing?
Right. And how do you manage that?
sometimes some things you can manage, some things you can't, and that's also, part of the wisdom, I guess.
Mm.
That, for example, one particular person never warmed up to me, whereas there were several who did talk about, when I was interviewing them, oh yeah, you're a psychologist, are you actually going to psychoanalyze me? Are you going to give me some questionnaires to understand my personality if I'm and so there was all these, some people would have that tension, fear about why you are snooping around here all the time. And that's justifiable. And I think that's something you learn in the process, to make them feel comfortable and to make them understand that this is not managerially implied, probing and psychoanalysis that I'm doing here. But sometimes you just also have to accept that there will be one or two people who will never warm up to you, and that's okay, because the rest has. And you just live with it, I guess.
Good advice, helpful advice for all of us. Thank you. I wanted to ask, so what is one way that you would like to see this research built upon with future research? And do you have a future agenda?
Right. So obviously, oh yes, certainly. I think play in general is my research agenda for many years to come. And the one thing that we are trying to do with this paper is look at how it's leading to work engagement and creative work problem solving. We also want to have other, angle to how play has an impact on work process. I'm also engaged in other research projects in the entrepreneurial setting, especially small medium enterprises, where I'm trying to look at play as an organizational practice, how it is impacting, playing a role in the way entrepreneurs, engage in their entrepreneurial activity, how it's impacting the entire entrepreneurial process, and also how, as a practice, play is having an impact on different myriads of other things that we want to know, health and well-being and innovation and all of that, how organizational play is impacting organizations, and the people in it in different ways. So I think there's no end to what we can do now with play. And as it will become more and more important, I think, currently with the new generation who has already, this huge exposure to this gamification, the way they are playing, the way we are teaching at schools, right, to kids. So it will follow the heels of these people, these new workers. And it's very soon going to become something that we just cannot ignore. It's just there. We just have to look into the eyes. And I think there's a huge possibility of how we as scholars can, understand play and the different types and how it unfolds and how it is related to work and how it's helping or not helping, people on an individual level, on an organizational level, etc. So I think there's a huge agenda that's ahead.
What's a piece of advice you would have for emerging scholars wishing to contribute to this field?
Well, I personally feel that for young scholars, if they're interested in the phenomena of play, I think the first thing should be to really go out there in the field and experience this, though, starting with a qualitative work, because there's so much we still don't know. And that is really primordial to understand the phenomena and the different types of play, which would be different phenomena, if you may. So my request to young scholars would always be to if they are fascinated by play, they should actually go out there in the organization and learn and experience it themselves with the people that they are studying, with the qualitative work, and following it then afterwards with quantitative work, etc., using scales. So I really believe that this is a phenomenon that demands, that requests, begs, so to speak, a deeper understanding, and it should be looked at in a more qualitative way first, and then, moving it forward to a quantitative way of measurement.
So just ending on a slightly more personal note, how does deep play or other types of play have a role in your own work?
My own life, you mean to say, like my work?
Your own work, part of your own creative process.
Right. Which is always, I've always been a very artistic person in some sense. So I used to be a writer. I mean, I have published fiction. So I have seen myself how engaged, this flow-like engagement that I've had with writing, completely unrelated to research, right? Writing short stories, writing poems, and how that has hugely impacted my creative process in general, and enriched me as a person, and helped me bring more on the table when my work is concerned. So I think all of us, whether we have reflected upon it or not, have this side to us, which we can call play, in the sense that which may be completely unrelated to the work that we are doing as a professional worker, but which enriches us, and which not just is a respite and replenishment, but it does more than that, right? Where we can actually be our own self and connect to our own inner self and soul, or whatever you may want to call it, and experience that flow. So I think for me, art and writing and music, this has always been my play, my, very deep, true play, whatever you call it. And it has always been something that has, I think, positively affected my work, and helped me to be who I am, I guess, somewhere.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights and experience with us. Was there anything else you wanted to add? Those are all the questions I have for you.
No, but I hear that you are a new play scholar, and I would very briefly, if you can tell me how you thought of getting into play.
I actually had a similar pathway into play, I think. So my background was working with entrepreneurs in Australia, early stage entrepreneurs in accelerators and incubators. And I think, as you said, it's really, play is unavoidable, especially in those contexts, in the context of high-tech entrepreneurship. You just see it everywhere. So when I joined Copenhagen Business School to do my PhD, it wasn't actually with the intention to study play. It was more looking at creativity processes and innovation in high-tech firms. But as you've said, it really is unavoidable in that context. And so
Right.
in my research, it's really led me back to play. So I'm doing both qualitative and experiments in my research. And I think what fascinates me about play is how you see it in so many different ways and aspects within the organization. So many different types of play, which is why I thought your paper on deep play and just highlighting this different type of play that we hadn't seen before was so fascinating.
Well, I'm so excited to know more as you proceed with your PhD and all the new insights that you're going to bring to the to us and others who are very interested in play at work.
Thanks, Jania, and congratulations again on winning the award.
Thank you so much. Thank you.